Culture is endless. People give countless names to other people, to natural, biological, and imaginary entities such as mountains, rivers, the fish in them, the cities around them, their technological achievements, their history, fashions, and myths. Furthermore, culture allows people to make countless connections between these named entities. You can think, for example, of couples, groups, and networks. Yet, the question is how cultural life discovers its infinite hidden potentialities. One can never fully explore all of it. In my dissertation, I wanted to better understand cultural life together with the basic processes that support diversification and growth. To achieve this goal, I developed a theory based on two premises. First, individual human brains are able to make associations. Second, the brain controls incoming stimuli through homeostatic regulation. If you have never heard the word homeostasis, imagine it as the intellectual thermostat of the brain. Based on these premises, the theory makes statements about the behavior of entire groups of authors and audiences. Association making and homeostasis are translated from the scale of the individual brain to a large collective scale. Entire groups of people create culture and develop collective memories. To operationalize my theory and put its predictions to the test against empirical data and historical experience, I also developed new laboratory methods. I called my toolbox dissemination workflow. Today, I will briefly outline how it works. To understand my idea, imagine you are a journalist. I once worked as a journalist, founding a professional magazine. You receive a new topic to report on. You read about it. You perfectly master the spoken and written word, but you don't understand the content of the articles you read. There are simply too many named entities you never heard about, too many new people, too many new ideas. Your first step will be to mark these named entities and look them up in an encyclopedia. Luckily, since 2006, there exists a computer program that can help you. It's called Wikifire. The Wikifire will take your text, mark named entities, and link them to Wikipedia. That way, it's easier for anyone to look them up. My idea was to use the Wikifire not as a journalist, but as a scientist. I got a grant, scientific support, access to a large digital library, and access to a supercomputer. My team wikified 50 million pages of news and books, all texts that mentioned the Chicago School, the topic I chose to test my theory on. Linking these data to an encyclopedia allowed me to go beyond my personal knowledge, extracting information about many more named entities mentioned in these data, places I had never heard of, dates when people were born, or locations where institutions reside. The next step was to analyze this structured information. Based on my theory, I developed an algorithm to simulate associative and collective memory. Once the math was put to paper, it turned out that researchers since the 1960s had already discovered that algorithms similar to mine actually produce meaningful things. This was an empirical hint for me that my theory may work on a really large scale. Other researchers had made observations similar to the ones that my causal model predicts. My implementation made it possible to study the formation of cultural circles as well as cultural diversification and polarization. The dissemination workflow differs from other approaches in that it works with named entities at all steps of decoding, analysis, and synthesis. Once the analysis is completed, multiple layers of analyzed information, geographical, historical, etc., can be compared to and mapped upon each other. This type of synthesis allows for new ways of hypothesis testing. My theory posits that in culture, the unit of evolutionary selection is not the isolated idea, but the group of similar ideas. The dissemination workflow decodes, analyzes, and maps such groups of ideas. Each map you see on the screen is the estimated geographical distribution of one such cultural unit. Evolution within one unit and evolution between multiple units obey different rules and different mathematics. The first is described through variation selection processes, the latter through homeostatic regulation. I was lucky to find many computer science students willing to help me write the computer code. Taking a data mining class, I started with 3 of my peers. The following years, there were 6, 9, 12, and an entire class working under my direction. At UCSB, 2 of my art history students were willing to join my lab, and also a geographer, as well as 2 gifted MAT designers, Siwa Park and Cindy Kang. They helped develop visual interfaces that are interactive. In the map on the screen, you can zoom in and out, you can click on each data point. The white points are publishers, the red ones are named entities extracted from the news. The yellow lines connect the publishers to the content that they published. Each map represents a group of ideas, one unit of evolutionary selection in a given larger discourse. The green haze represents the overall density of that larger discourse. The haze is like the nightlights seen on satellite images. It is the larger urban environment in which ideas are disseminated and received. One of the beauties of this workflow and interface is that it allows you to zoom into any city you haven't yet visited and see how named entities lined along its streets enter global culture. In the last 5 years, I applied my theory to study the Chicago School, science and humanities, as well as environmental awareness in the Arctic. There is room for much more analysis, mapping, and design. My next step is to develop a cultural radar. The cultural radar is like a rain radar, but with culture. It shows how named entities enter global culture from along the streets of cities and elsewhere. In addition, the culture radar also shows how groups of ideas grow and come toward you in real time. Ultimately, I hope that my theory will be a contribution to the study of those large-scale problems that people have a hard time addressing because they require large-scale cooperation. These problems include urban and social segregation, awareness of environment and biodiversity, as well as epidemics. All of these problems have in common that they are somehow related to urbanization, and they cannot be solved unless people find a cultural basis to cooperate. This recording was produced by Dan C. Baciu in Santa Barbara, California, April 20, 2020.